record. Okay. We'll have to sort of start in the middle of this. But anyways, I have the basic Pong game here. And what I want to do is use the observer pattern to have the scores increment. So out of curiosity, how many of you have tried making a game in the past? I'm saying no, no, yes. Oh, Pac-Man. Pac-Man's a fun game. Yes, from Heidi. Awesome. Sort of like a mix of yes and no's. You're trying to make one right now, but it's basically a simulator. Simulators, like I buy simulators for games, so I enjoy those quite a bit. So I would consider the problems you run in simulators very similar to games. So for when we have a game here, and so here's our main loop, as it were, and every single loop is going to be a state-free loop through. Basically, the game just sort of forgets what happens. It runs loop through, and all of our logic happens. This draw function is my loop. And so I have this is a very traditional object-oriented sort of weighted approach to do this. I have the ball. Notice that I created balls in an array. That's for maybe fun stuff later we could do. And here in balls, we're going to just for each all of them and call render. And then also up here, I have them update. So if we go take a look at the ball, when I update, I have it in, just changes location. So that's that smooth movement we see. And I have it bounce. And this little piece of code down here, this is where it chooses to bounce off of the right or the left side. What I want it to do is when it bounces, to increment the score. Now I also have a score class that is in charge of drawing itself to the screen. And it's also in charge of like knowing what the score is. And the score I created, I have a player score and an AI score for this. So normally what I might do, if I'm not using any kind of observer pattern, is pass the instances of these two scores into the balls. And then every time that the balls hit the edge of the screen, they would then increment the score for us. So I want to say that there's this better pattern. This is where the observer pattern comes in. So I'm going to create a new file here called observer.js. The way I'm doing this, I have to add in everything into here. So this is super fun. And an observer, we're going to do a class observer. We'll just call it. Yeah, observer is maybe observer system. And I'm going to have a constructor. So what I want to initialize as part of this observer system here is that we're going to have observers. So I want to store observers. So this dot observers equals an array. So objects are going to register themselves in here. Well, if they're going to register, then I have to have a method to register. So add observer. This takes in an observer. And this dot observers dot push observer. So if I do this, like the bare minimum of this so far, there's not really like much of an event yet. I can come to our main game. We'll set up our observation system. So observer system. And I'll set that up at the top here. Observer system equals new observer system. I can now pass this in to everything that needs to either be observed or wants to observe something. So for example, the scores want to observe. So therefore, the player score is going to get the observer system. And the AI score is going to get the observer system. And we can go into our score here. We're going to take in not only the location where it is, but the observer system. And we're going to add ourselves as an observer. So observer system dot add observer and pass in this. So this is like the fun part of JavaScript. I can just pass references to myself wherever I want because it's, it's JavaScript. I can do that. At this point in time, we have two observers, the two scores. Now we need to notify those observers when the ball hits the edge of the screen. So we're going to add a new method here, notify. And we're going to take in an event. And when that happens, we want to loop through the observers and tell them that event has happened. So we're going to say this.observers.forEach, get an observer, and we're going to say observer.onNotify. So call this method on it and pass it the event. So what happens here is we say, hey, all of you observers, an event has happened. Everyone gets the event. Now we do need to add this onNotify to all of our observers. So the scores now need an onNotify. And they need to take in this event. We need to now choose how these events work. I experimented with maybe using some kind of object to maybe in enum almost in other languages. But I think strings might actually just work with it. But we can use sort of constants too. That might help as well. Let's see. Oh, we have comments. Your coding partner, improving YouTube code we watched for Connect 4 in Python. YouTuber guy missed a lot of context. She and I are having fun with it. Loop through observers and tell them an event has occurred. Yes. Also, if you have questions, feel free to, I guess I don't know if you could raise your hand. I don't know if I will see that, but you can definitely put something in the comments, the chat. I will do my best to answer it. So on notify for an event, let's go back to our main game here. This loads first before everything else. So I can create some constants. Const, and I'm going to say event. Let's do AI scored equals AI scored. And const event player scored. The string in this doesn't really matter what this is. What really matters is that I'm consistent when I'm sending the event and when I'm receiving it. So now I can come into score and I can say, well, okay, if you're the event that I care about, I need to increment myself. Here's a problem. How do I know which one I'm looking for? Because this score is not a singleton. It's not just for the AI. It's not, just for the player. It's for both of them. So I need to know when I can increment myself. Well, that means I'm unfortunately going to need some kind of type in here. So if I have a type, and let's set a default to this to be, the type is a player. So this dot type equals type. This means that in the game, when I call each of these, the player, I don't need to add in the type, but for the AI, I need to add in the type AI. Now, I can, on notify, do a little bit of an if statement here. So if the event is equal to, where was this one? if the event is the AI scored, and we are, so this dot type is equal to AI. If that is true, then we want to increment our type. So increment our score. So this dot score plus equals to 1. Else if. I have to do an else if here because theoretically I could add events that have nothing to do with scoring, but score would receive all of these events. It's both the positive and the negative to this specific method of the pattern that I'm implementing here. I'll show you the next one is going to be a way to do observe pattern without tying it quite like this. So if the event is equal to event player scored, and this dot type is equal to player, then this dot score plus equals to 1. It looks a little bit weird when we do that, but we need to make sure that like we're responding to the correct events, that we're in the correct instance of it, which feels a little bit dirty and weird and not that great. But let's ignore that for right now, and let's figure out how to actually fire at that event. So in game here, we have our observer system. We have the notify that's going to link through and run this on notify function. So let's go to game and pass in the observer system to each of the balls. If I add a new ball here and I do this as well, I need to add in, actually no, I don't need to do it right here. Not when I create the ball. I need to do it when I update the ball, the observer system. There's a reason for this, is because the ball doesn't really need to store this observer system. It's free for us to like just constantly pass these in because, or very cheap because we're just passing a reference to a place in memory because it's an object. So in ball here, in update, we're going to take in the observer system. And then we'll go into bounce. So we'll pass this into here. So we'll take the observer system into bounce. And here, whenever we like do one of these contacts, we'll notify that something happened. So yeah, this location at x minus, so if we're less than 0, this means we hit off of the left-hand side. So this means the observer system dot notify, and we pass in the event. If it's the left-hand side, that means the AI scored. On this other one, it's going to be observer system dot notify and event player scored. So I want to see if this works. I've done a lot of programming here and I haven't actually checked my work. So I need to check that. So let's see what happens. We got a score. So now we know that, let's see, yeah, it works on both sides. So what we have here is the events going back and forth without having to directly talk to each other. So they've been divorced from the code. Now, if we want to see this like go up, actually like in action with more than just like, waiting for it very slowly, let's go ahead and go back to the game and uncomment this fun line here. Hit save and hit refresh. And now every single frame, we have a 10% chance of creating a new ball. Well, that's good and all. And the observer pattern works no matter how many balls we have. It doesn't matter. We just pass it into update and they just take care of it. The problem we have now is we can't end the game. We can't end the game because, well, we don't know that the game has been ended. So if we take a look here, where are we ending the game? I don't, like, score just increases itself. Game has no like idea of when we're going to end the game. So I would have to create some kind of like big system to figure that out. So I don't want to implement that right now because I want to be like cognizant of time. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new branch off of what I did in master. And this is going to be live coding class based. Do these changes, commit them, and what is this? Observer pattern object oriented style. And now I want to switch over to what I did when I was sort of playing around with this. I implemented, well, actually, I'll show the end result first. It's exactly the same thing. It increments the scores. But as soon as we get to the end, we have a lovely message that's there to inspire you to be better the next time you play. Never mind that I didn't give you paddles to play. That's, ignore that. Now, if we take a look at our game, like the main game, it's completely different than what I had before. It's very cleaned up. I now have my event system, which is what my observer system was before. And I have this arena where I pass the event system into. If we go and take a look at that, the arena is doing everything that I was doing in game. It's just, it's doing render. But it also has this on notify so that it can check to see what the event was. If the event was the player won, then we get a nice message, you won. And if the AI won, you get this lovely inspirational message. The reason why I needed to do this was because the observer pattern, as we made it, requires you to pass in this. And I can't pass in this unless we're in a class. And that's the entire idea here, is event register this. That's why I had to create this class arena and sort of organize things in that way. But there is a better way. So let's switch back over to the master branch here. We are back to, let's see, you're deleted. We're back to what we originally had at the beginning of this talk. Just a ball that increments with no scoring happening whatsoever. So let's say I don't want to use object-oriented programming. Let's say I want to use something a little bit more functional. So what if I create a function and we'll call this an observer, like create observers, create observer. Or create event might be better. In create event, we're going to return an object, and this object is going to do the same thing that we were doing in that observer system before. We're going to have a register observer method that takes in a, I'm going to have this take in a callback function actually. And I'm also going to have a notify that takes in an event. Now, using JavaScript and the power of closures, I'm going to create our observers array in here. And so when we register an observer, it's going to push into observers, which means we don't need the this keyword anymore. Okay, so we're going to push our callback into observers. And on notify, we're going to loop through and just hit these. We may not even need an event here. It's possible that we can just get away with renaming this to, instead of observers, to just the callbacks, and then callbacks for each back, and then for every callback, call it, and that's it. Like, we don't really care about this. But what are you upset about? Notify, you need is comma, to be valid JavaScript and all. So now that I have this create event, which is pretty close to what the class had before, I'm going to create events that are based on what we like, going to be individual variables. So I can now do let AI scored event, let player scored event, and create them as separate variables right here. So AI scored event equals create event. Player scored event equals create event. I can now pass these in to the appropriate places. So when we create a player score, we're going to now pass in the player scored event. When we create an AI score, we're going to pass in the AI scored event. This is really huge because this means now in score, we don't have to do any of that type stuff nonsense. We can just take in the scored event. We don't have to know what it is. Store it away. Scored. There you go. Thank you, keyboard. And so we do need that. Oh, I almost forgot. We don't even need to store it away. What we need to do is register a callback with it. So we're going to have to set like maybe handle scored event. So when this happens, we want to say this dot score plus equals to 1. And that's it. So on this scored event dot, what did I call it? Register observer. I should probably just name it to register. Register this dot handle scored event. Now I'm not using the parentheses here, so I'm passing a reference to the function along with its scoped information. Although, is it really its scoped information? Probably not. But what I can do is I can bind it and pass in this at this point in time. So now this function is going to know what this is, meaning it can update the score properly. And that's all we have to do here with score. We come back to game. We have our AI scored event, our player scored event. When we do our updates for the balls here, it's going to be a little bit less nice for the balls. We're going to pass in both the AI scored event and the player scored event because it needs access to both of them. And so here we can do AI scored event, player scored event. We'll then pass these straight on through to the bounce. AI scored event, player scored event. And then here, this was the AI scoring. So we're going to call AI scored event dot notify. We don't have to pass anything in. It knows that the AI scored because only objects that care about the AI scoring have this event. Player scored event dot notify. So let's see if this works. Hey, and the player scored. Let's do one more over here. See if the player, yeah, okay. And exactly the same thing that I did before. I can add all the balls, and it's just gonna work. So let's say we wanted to add that ending screen in. We wanted to figure out how that was. Well, it's actually gonna be a lot simpler in this specific case. We could create some kind of a new event, like let game over event, and just create that right here. I can now create events, not really care, like you're only gonna be notified if you actually want to be notified. The score doesn't have to be notified now on the game over event. In fact, it could be the one sending the notifications. So with game over event, let's say like this main game wants to pay attention to that and like have some kind of function that runs that then displays some kind of like game over message, or sets this to be like, are we playing? So what if we have let is playing. We start by saying is playing is true. And then here in draw, we'll do, okay, if is playing, we do all of this. Else, we're going to just draw out to the screen. So if I remember correctly, we can just do this, what is it? It's text, not with a capital T. The actual name, I can go to score and see how this is. We have text size, fill, and text. That's what I care about. Steal for myself there. Text size, we'll make this like a good like 64. That's a good number. Fill, we'll make this maybe like I don't know, 200, whatever. That's probably like gray but close to white. And then the text will be just plain old game over. Now I could do other events like player 1, AI 1. And then like once the game is over, I then figure out, okay, well, which one won? I'll just go with that text. This location, we'll just do something like 50x and 50y. In order to run this, we need that callback function. So let's do in setup here. We're going to do the game over event dot register. We're going to add in a function here and just say is playing is now false. And then we're going to pass into the score when we update. Where is that? There's the balls. Player score. Oh, we have player score.render. We're going to have to, for each of these scores, have an update method for it too. So here is like player score render, AI score render. Let's do player score dot update and pass it in the game over event. AI score update game over event. And now we can go into score and add that. Update, we take in the game over event. And in here, we're just gonna determine if this dot score is greater than or equal to 7, then game over event dot notify. I can spell. And this should end the game for us. Let's find out if I did it right. Or if we crash. Hey, we got the game over right here. It paused the game, like everything sort of was still there, and the game over is showing here. Now I could figure out some way to make the game over happen over here. I can have the ball still update and move in the background. Those are all implementation details. What I'm hoping is that you can see the benefits of this functional style of creating events as these sort of independent objects, and then passing those objects around, and they're the in-between step. So the ball, for example, doesn't have to know that the score is carrying that it hit the right edge of the screen. All the ball knows is that, hey, I know that when I hit the edge of the screen, that means somebody scored, the player scored, or the AI scored. I don't care who cares about that, which means anybody can register as an observer of that event. The other thing that's really nice about this sort of class-based, non-class-based style, the functional style, is I don't have to create an entire class just to pass itself in. I can use callback functions, pass references around, and I think it makes it really clean and easy to follow. So I do want to pause for any questions about this specific code before I go into the higher level aspects of the talk. Can I show the function that creates the events? Yes, here it is, right here. If you have further questions, absolutely, please still ask them. I'll have even more time for questions at the end. But I'm going to come back to our slides here. And all right, so what are design patterns? I wanted to go up this afterwards so we can have the context of seeing the entire object pattern in the context of a game and what it did to the code base. I didn't show what we'd have to do if we didn't use the object pattern, and I'm hoping that you can sort of see what that would be. Design patterns are organization, sort of like this GIF that we're showing. It allows us to put code in very specific places and also have them not tightly integrate themselves into each other. One of the biggest downsides of object-oriented programming, especially with inheritance, is the super tightly coupled systems where you make a change over here and it breaks everything else. An observer pattern is actually a way to decouple code so that they don't really care about each other. Now, if you send bad events, that's a different thing altogether, but that could, there's others, we can't get away from every kind of system. So I think I put the same I was doing why would we want to use a design pattern, especially why would we want to use the observer pattern? And the biggest thing that I think about is it keeps us able to keep our code clean. It allows us to have our code not be aware of what each other are doing, why they're doing it, and then they keep you, as us, the developers, from feeling like we can pass in the full objects and say, hey, yeah, ball, you can have an instance of score. Just go ahead, take it, and then just do whatever you want with it. Score instead updates itself even if I had a method on score that said like, increment score, and I passed in the score over to the ball, and the ball was in charge of calling that function. That's an area where now ball is doing a little bit too much. It's too aware of what it needs to update. Make this game a lot more complicated, and then we're going to have that pattern all across the code base, and it's going to be terrible. That's why I think design patterns like observe pattern are really nice to use. And I don't know if I need this this pattern, this slide anymore, because I kind of went over it before. To quick recap what we did, we created an object, specifically the last one. We created a factory, essentially, that generates observers, which are just objects that contain a list of functions that anybody could register a callback into, and have those functions be called whenever the event happens. And because we store events in different variables, we know through the name of that variable exactly what that event is every single time. And I think, yeah, there we go. End of that. So questions time. What do you call this thing you are doing? Creating an object on the fly in return. Okay, so let's go back to this code. I would call this, it's a classic closure in JavaScript. I would almost call it a factory, although that may not be strictly correct. Basically, when I call this function, it's not a constructor, so it's not like the old style of object-oriented programming. It's creating this object here, and it has access to the internal state. So classic closure. Any other questions? Also, feel free to just shout them out too if you have a mic. It's a higher order function containing a closure. There we go. That's a great explanation for it. Thank you, John. Jeremy asks, I have an app that needs words to bounce around like your ball and then respond when clicked on to add to a list. Yeah, absolutely. You could basically use something very, like that's an event-driven architecture. An observer pattern is great for an event-driven architecture. Any other questions? You like it, Leanne? It's pretty clean. Yeah, I mean, I like it too. In a React, would you use a state library like mobx? Yes. Let me think about this. It's not exactly the observer pattern. There's some other patterns. That's more like the state pattern, where you're having like a centralized state and you're storing things into it, and then you're like sort of reading from the state. It's still a design pattern, and I highly recommend using something like mobx, Redux, anything like that, especially if you're sharing state across components. If it's all within one component, you can create like a micro event system within that component if necessary. You could use observer from RxJS. I haven't used RxJS, but probably. This seems like a pattern to use with WebSockets. Yeah, anytime that you want to separate away like something that's doing something from something that happens. So if you get like an event that, hey, database thing changed, I'm going to send an event that happens. So this is like an observer system across front end to back end, essentially in that case. Or system to system, like front end to front end. This is related to PubSub, which can be good for WebSockets. Absolutely, yeah. PubSub is also another, yeah, PubSub is definitely something very similar to observer pattern. And I would say it's more like a specific implementation guide. And I guess that's a a definition for design pattern. They're not like algorithms where I can say this is how to do it. You will always create your observers with a function like this. That's not true. You will find that your individual needs for your application will depend heavily on the context of your application, especially if you're doing something like an observer pattern across front end to back end. It just happens to be that this is the best for me right now. But knowing the general pattern can help you recognize when you need something like it, and then you sort of invent what you need right then. Any other questions? Questions, comments, thoughts?
Repeat what you just said about knowing what the pattern is enables you to what?
Knowing what the pattern is enables you to start seeing places to put that pattern into code. So I think a lot of us know that saying when you have a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail.
Yes.
If you only know the observer pattern, you'll start seeing, like, you only see places to put the observer pattern. But I think like the second part of the hammer nail statement is if you have a lot of tools in your bag, you start seeing all the solutions for each of the tools that you have. So if you learn observer pattern, if you learn state pattern, if you learn any number of patterns, you will start seeing all the different places to use them all.
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see. Why would one choose an observer pattern versus a state pattern? I think a state pattern is more about like holding an internal state for either like an object or a series of objects. Like, for example, that MobX or Redux pattern for React. And observer pattern is really about informing some other components that something happened. As you noticed with this one, there's no actual state with these events. I just create this function and then call them. No information or data is passing back and forth, and nothing is saved. As soon as that event is done and gone, it's lost from memory forever. So that would be the key difference there is, do you need to like store something? Do you need it to be like maybe not necessarily trigger an event right away, but be something you store that's now just accessible all the time? ClojureScript has Reframe that uses this with React. It can make front-end code very clean. Absolutely. Like, I've not used ClojureScript, but anytime you use a design pattern, I've noticed that does tend to make the code look very clean. What is the game programming patterns book? That is right here, and I will put a link to this in chat here. Oh, wait. Leanne, you already got to me. You already got to it. Thank you, Leanne. And that's the end of chat. So I think that's a meetup, everyone, unless there's any last thoughts or questions. Can you see that other page with my GitHub? Which page was it? Not that one.
The URL of your GitHub.
The URL of my GitHub, absolutely. So let's just go github.com/. I have Brooks Builds is where I did a lot of this code. I'll put a link to this also in here. All the code. So I built those two examples while live streaming on twitch.tv. And so all of the code that I do that's live, that ends up here on this GitHub repository. And I will also share my Twitch channel with you. See, that's just Twitch in general. Here's my channel. You can hang out with me. I do streams every single morning, every single weekday morning. I've been doing a lot of Rust programming recently, but every once in a while, you know, I come back to JavaScript too. And I've been going through this game programming patterns book and converting all of the C++ examples in it to JavaScript and then Rust. All right, well, this sounds like a meetup, everyone. So thank you so much for stopping by.
Hey, Brooks.
Yeah.
Is there a Slack channel?
A Slack channel for like this meetup?
Yeah, because earlier Mike had mentioned he'd copied something out to a channel and I didn't see it on Meetup, so.
I did not. I don't have a Slack channel just for the meetup. Mike, if you're still here.
Oh, that's okay. I've already got his contact information, but I was just wondering if this group had a. And you just said you were sharing your links, and I didn't see them in the chat.
Oh, I did. I thought. Oh my gosh, I've been putting them to John. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Okay.
I've been sharing links this entire time, and
Well,
I'm
if
just
you
sending them
repaste
only
them
to
from
John.
John to general, the 14 of us that are left could get it.
Okay, hold on. Here's my Twitch.
It's actually on one of your slides.
It is on my slides. Okay, hold on. I'll share my slides again. Back to here and my slides. This is my personal GitHub, and then also not shared. Where did that chat go? I then posted in the Zoom chat to everyone the Brooks Builds GitHub.
Cool. And you said that Twitch is where you put a lot of your live code.
Twitch, yeah, I do a lot of live code there. I also post these to all like the videos from Twitch onto YouTube as well. I'm going to post the video from this talk onto YouTube as well. I will post a link to that in the Meetup page as soon as it goes out. So if you want to look at everything else that I have, just basically click into the rest of my channel at that point. All right. John, who won the raffle, did you get in for? You're going to send me
I
information.
sent it to you. I already sent it to you in the chat privately.
Okay, you sent it to me in chat. I will try to find it and then give that to Mike.
It'll be toward the top.
Yeah, I'm going to go all the way up.
You could save your whole chat and do a text search.
Yeah, I'll have to do that. Let me save that just in case it goes away when I end it. Chat saved, show folder. All right, I've got that. I'm going to stop that share in case I accidentally share private information. There he goes. I actually have the chat. Thank you, everybody. All right, thank you, everybody, for helping out with this. All right. I'm going to do my outro again. So thank you, everybody, for stopping by the meetup. We are doing these, as I mentioned, every third Thursday of the month. We have speakers lined up for the next, I think, through October now. So I think I'll have to check to see like what's available. We usually skip December, so I've got to figure out how many we actually have for the rest of the year. But stay tuned to the Meetup page or my Twitter for whenever we're going to have the next meetups. I will tweet out the appropriate links at the appropriate times. Jelani, you're asking for resources when you're a beginner. Join a Slack group that's local to your community, like Denver has Denver Devs, and just start programming with everybody else. That's my suggestion. All right, everybody. Is that a green tarp hanging by me? Yeah, that's my green screen that I use for streaming. With that, I'm going to declare that this meetup is done.
Thank you. That was really good.
Absolutely. Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you, Sue. Generally, you're located in the Denver area. If you're not a part of Denver Devs, Slack, I'm going to post into chat and not send it only to John.
That's a really good one. Yeah.
All right, so that's a link to Denver Devs. Click on it, enter in your email, and you'll get an invite within the next day or two. There's thousands of us now that are on it, so you can hang out with all of us. And there's plenty of meetups in town, not just this one.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Well, I'm going to head off and go get ready for tomorrow. So have a good one, everyone. See you next time.
Bye. Have a good one.